It was a quiet February morning on the line from Davos to Klosters in the Graubünden Alps, where the mountains remember what it means to be dangerous, where the snow doesn't fall gently, but lurks. The train was nearly empty, only a few passengers traveling at such altitude, only workers, only people who had reason to be there. And then a man boarded, tall, in a red warning vest jacket, with a rucksack that didn't look light, with instruments, with measuring devices. He sat directly across from me, without hesitation. He wore a radio on his belt, small measuring instruments in his pockets, a thermometer, a snow density gauge, a notebook full of markings. But the most remarkable thing was his eyes. They were constantly moving, even when his body was still, as if he were constantly observing something, calculating something, hearing something. The mountains. He was an Avalanche Watcher. I could see that at once. A man who read the mountains like other people read newspapers, who understood them in a way deeper than language, that went down into the depths of snow, of ice, of rock. I asked him what he did. Slowly, with a resistance, as if it weren't easy to talk about, he told me of his work. "I observe the mountains," he said. "I measure snowfall, snow temperature, snow cover. I listen to the mountains, to how they speak, how they breathe. And when they say that there will be avalanches, then I tell people, that's my profession, my only profession. I've done nothing else since I was a young man, and I'll do nothing else until I die." "And you can hear that?" I asked, almost disbelieving. "Yes," he said quietly. "You can hear it. The snow has a voice. It's not a human voice, no, it's a sound, a structure that's changing, a tension in the mountain, a change in rhythm. And when the voice becomes different, then I know it's time to warn." It wasn't romantic or dramatic the way he spoke. It was very matter-of-fact, very serious. A man doing his work, carrying the responsibility for many people, skiers, climbers, villagers, whom he'd never meet, whom he'd never know, but whose lives he protected every day. He pulled a small device from his pocket, a data logger, he said, that records the temperature and humidity and snow cover every 5 minutes, 24 hours a day. "That's my ear," he said, "in the mountain. I have 3 of these scattered all over the mountains, and I also have measurements I take by hand, and I also listen, here," he pointed to his ear, "with my own ear. The mountain, it has many voices. If you listen long enough, you learn to distinguish them all. The sound when the snow layers are stable, the sound when they start to loosen, the sound that is like a warning, a murmur, a crack, a whisper that says, 'Wait, something will happen.'" He got off at Klosters and went out, his rucksack on his back, his radio at his side, his thermometer ready. I watched him go up toward the mountain, on paths only locals know, paths only someone who's spent their life in the mountain knows. And I thought of the power he had, the power to understand the mountains, the power to listen to nature, the power to tell others when they were in danger. It wasn't the power of superheroes in films. It was the power of observation, of patience, of love for the place where you lived. And also, it was the power of solitude. The Avalanche Watcher, he's alone on the mountain. He has his instruments, his notebooks, his radios. But he doesn't have many people. He has the mountains, and that's enough. "I have a question," I said, before he'd gone far. "Were you afraid? Were you ever afraid?" He turned around, and a small smile came to his face. "Fear? Yes, I was afraid. But fear and love, they're close together. When you love something, you're afraid to lose it. And the mountains, I love them. So yes, I'm afraid. But this fear, it makes me better. It makes me more attentive. It makes me careful. There are also moments when I'm up there alone in the snow and the silence is complete, and I hear the mountain breathing. In those moments, I'm not alone anymore. I'm part of the mountain, and the mountain is part of me. And then, the fear, it's gone. There's only understanding. There's only love. And then he was gone, up into the night. The mountains aren't a simple thing to understand. They're not friendly, they're not evil. They're simply as God or nature made them. They're nature in its most original form, in its deepest truth. And this man, the Avalanche Watcher, he was like a translator standing between two worlds, between the sound of the mountains and the human voice, between the silence of nature and the words of people. I asked him if he's ever afraid that he won't warn fast enough, that people will die because he missed a warning. His face grew dark. "Yes," he said. "That's the fear that accompanies me every night. I've killed people, not with my hands, but with my mistakes, with my misunderstanding of the mountain. It's the heaviest burden I carry, but it's also the reason I'm watchful, why I give everything every day, why I love and respect the mountains as if I were loving a person. Now, when it snows, when I'm in the mountains, I think of him, of his eyes that observed, of his radio that carried messages to the world, messages of warning, of protection, of the mountain that spoke with him, that revealed its secrets to him. And I'm grateful, very grateful, that such people exist. People who listen, people who understand, people who are willing to stand in the snow their whole lives to save others. It's not a profession of fame. It's not a profession of recognition. Sometimes, when he warns and no one dies, people think it was wrong to warn. They say, "You frightened us for nothing." But that's not right. The avalanches, they didn't come because the man warned. And that's enough for him. That's his success. The absence of death. The man, before he got off, showed me another notebook, his own personal notebook, not his work notebook. "Here," he said, "I write down what I learn every day, the sounds of the snow, the signs of the mountain, the way light breaks from ice crystals, the rhythm of the wind, the way animals move when the snow is unstable. And sometimes I also write things that have nothing to do with avalanches. Sometimes I write about how beautiful the mountain is, how beautiful it is to live, to be here, to hear the mountains, to protect the mountains. My life, it's not big, but it's complete, it's meaningful, and that's all that matters." His hands were rough, cracked from snow and cold, but his eyes were gentle, laden with wisdom and responsibility, and also with a deep contentment you can't buy. The train travels on. The wheels rattle. Clack, 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 clack. And the mountain remains, silent and glorious. And the Avalanche Watcher sits above, and listens, and warns, and saves lives he'll never know. And in my chest, I feel gratitude that there are still people who listen, who understand, who watch. And I sink into sleep, into the protection, into the safety that others have taken on. The night is safe because he watches, because the mountains speak with him, and he carries their speech to us. The scent comes suddenly through the open window as the train pulls into a small station. It must be Orada, the line between Orada and Arad, and the fragrance is so strong, so complete, that for a moment I don't know if I'm still sitting on the train or whether I'm in another time, another life. It smells of cooked fruit, of sugar, of apricots becoming jam, and it also smells of my mother. And with this scent, I return. I'm 8 years old again, and it's autumn, and my mother stands in the kitchen making jam. The window is open and cold wind comes in, but the kitchen is warm from the work, warm from the great pot on the stove, where the fruit simmers and transforms into something new. The fruits, plums, apricots, sometimes wild berries my father brought from the forest, swim in sugar and lemon juice, and my mother stirs them slowly with a large wooden spoon, and the fragrance fills not just the kitchen but the whole house, perhaps even the whole street. My mother is young in this memory, younger than I am now, and her hands are constantly busy. One hand stirs the bubbling mass in a large copper pot she inherited from her mother. The other removes with a flat spoon the pink foam from the surface, the foam that later, if I'm good, she gives to me to eat, still warm, still sticky. She works quietly, concentrately, as if she's not cooking jam but creating something sacred, a substance that preserves time. And I sit at the table and watch her. I'd much rather go to her and help, but I can't get too close to the hot pot, so I sit there and watch, and I hear her sing very softly as she works. The song makes the work feel lighter. The song she sings. I still remember the melody, though the words have faded into the years. Isn't cheerful and isn't sad. It's simply there, like part of the work, like the stirring spoon, like the fire, like the pot itself. It's as if with the song she's also transforming the fruit, as if the music makes the sugar a little softer, the fruit a little sweeter, the whole kitchen a little warmer. And I'm enchanted by this moment, completely hypnotized by this woman, my mother, who knows how to turn fruit into jam, how to preserve time, the summer, so you can eat it in winter, so the good things don't disappear. She's a sorceress, I think then. She can turn red fruit into gold. Later, when the jam grows thick enough, and I quickly learn to recognize this consistency, when it's ready, you don't need much experience, just attention. My mother fills it into jars. She'd sterilized the jars beforehand, heated them in the oven long before I was born, so they wouldn't break when the hot jam goes in, because the jars too are nervous of heat. And when the jam flows into the jars, it gleams like jewels, like little red and golden treasures you're allowed to take into winter. The warm light from the lamp above the kitchen refracts in the red and orange mass, dances in it, and the jars look like little windows into another summer, another world, a time of safety and love. My mother then seals the jars with white metal lids and rubberized paper, which she carefully screws on to the warm jars, twists until they're firm, but not so firm you can't open them. And when the jam cools, and we must be patient, very patient, it might take hours, it makes a clicking sound. Click. One after the other, the jars speak to us. They say everything is fine, that the vacuum has been created, that the jam is now safe, that it can last months, perhaps years, perhaps decades. And this clicking sound is the sound of time being preserved, the sound of safety, of foresight, of a mother's love that wants to say, I'm taking care of you. I'll make sure you have something sweet to eat in winter, that you can remember the summer, that you'll never go hungry, that you'll never be alone. And I think, sitting at the table watching the jars, as the jam hardens and the color slowly grows a little darker, from red to a deeper red, to a color almost black as night, that this is what mothers do, their secret work that never ends, that they do without anyone seeing, without receiving praise. They take the good things of life, the fruit, the sun, the summer, the moments of bliss, the fleeting seconds, and they preserve them so we have them later, so we don't forget there are good things, that life is beautiful, that the world is worth living in, even when it grows hard. They transform the temporary into the eternal. They take a few weeks of summer and make from it memories that can last a whole lifetime, that carry the sun through long, cold winters, through war and loss, through all the difficulties of aging. And in later years, long after my mother died, long after I myself grew old, I see such jam in a shop or at a market, and the price is ridiculously high. A tiny jar for a fortune, more than I pay for a shirt. And I don't understand why, until I think that what can't be paid for isn't the sugar and the fruit. It's the time bound into it. It's the hand of a mother stirring. It's a song sung while the fruit cooks. It's love packaged in glass. You can't buy that. You can only receive it if someone loves you, if someone sits for hours in the warm kitchen and cooks, only for you, only so you have something sweet in winter, so you're not alone. The train starts again, slowly leaving the station, and the scent gradually fades. But it's still there, still in the air of the compartment, still in my clothes, still in my thoughts, still in my heart. And I still see my mother before me, see her hands stirring, the wooden spoon moving through the bubbling mass, hear her song flowing through the warm kitchen like honey, like the jam itself. Autumn was beautiful then. That was a year when I still had everything. And winter would be beautiful too, because there would be jam, because time would be preserved, because love could be kept in jars, accessible, tangible, there when I needed it. And I lean my head against the window, and the landscape flows past like a dream, like a film you've seen 1,000 times, and I'm back on the train between Oradea and Arad. But I'm also still in that kitchen, in that time, in that moment, in those jars full of jam standing there cooling. And my eyes grow heavy, slowly, ever heavier. And the memory carries me away into deeper waters, into sleep, into the autumn of another time, where my mother still lives and cooks and sings, where time is still slow, where love is still warm in the jars. I met the beekeeper on the line between Vesprem and Topolka on a warm summer evening when the light still hung gold-orange over the fields and Lake Balaton shimmered like mercury when you saw it through the window. He wore a light cotton shirt, and his skin was brown and deeply lined, like the earth after a long summer. And everywhere on him, in the pockets, in the folds of his clothes, was the scent of honey, not like sugar, but like sunshine you could smell, like blossoms transformed into nectar. That fragrance was so strong that I understood at once this man wasn't simply a seller. He was a beekeeper, head to toe. The man doesn't simply sit there. He has several small baskets with him, and from these baskets radiates a kind of warmth. Not the warmth of fire, but the inner warmth of life, of many small creatures that together are warmer than alone. And I soon understood these were containers holding, not bees that would have been dangerous on a train, but honey, pure, liquid honey from the summer that he'd harvested from the hive only that morning. He saw me looking, and a broad smile burst across his face. Immediately he began to speak, not like someone who has time and patience, but like someone so full of something that words simply have to flow out, like honey from a warm jar. He told me he'd been a beekeeper for 48 years, that his father had been a beekeeper and his grandfather's father, and at some point, there was an ancestor who kept the first bee. And since then, the life of his family had been inseparably linked with these creatures. They weren't simply insects to him, but partners, family, teachers. And the bees, he said, and here his voice grew quieter, warmer, more thoughtful. The bees are the best teachers you can have. They show you how to truly work together without words, without commands, without force. In a beehive, there are no egoists. Every bee does what's good for the colony, and this isn't sacrifice, but harmony. And what's good for the colony is in the end best for every individual bee. That's a different mathematics than the one we humans normally understand. Normally, we think, If I take everything for myself, I'll be happiest. But the bees know better. They've long since learned this truth. He opened one of the baskets and showed me a jar of honey. It was warm in my hands, warm like a living creature, and the color was dark gold, almost red in some places, like the sky at sunset, and it gleamed as if it had an inner light, as if the sun itself had become trapped in this jar. He said this honey came from wildflowers, from blossoms growing in the forests around Lake Balaton, flowers that no farmer planted, but that nature itself placed there. Bees fly everywhere, into lands people don't know, into forests humans haven't explored, and they gather nectar from flowers few people have ever seen. And from this nectar, these hidden treasures of nature, they make gold, pure golden honey, the greatest wonder of the animal world. He then told me about his life, which I could picture completely. Every morning, before sunrise, before the world is awake, he goes to his hives. He watches how they're doing. He listens to their humming, to the tone they make, to the song they sing. For yes, that's a song. When the humming sounds happy, then all is well, then the world is in order. When it sounds sick, thin, and tense, then he knows something is wrong, and he has to act, and it will frighten him, because he loves these creatures. He's learned to understand the bees the way you understand someone you've lived with your whole life, your spouse, your child, your own breath. He knows what they need. He knows how they think. He knows them better than he knows himself. And the work is hard. The beekeeper grows old with this work. His back is bent from bending, from lifting, from carrying heavy boxes of honey. His hands are stung by bees, not from malice, but from carelessness, he says, or perhaps from love, from defending the colony. And the summers are long and hot, and there are years when the harvest is poor, when the bees can't collect enough because the summer was too dry or too wet, or a predatory insect came and decimated the stocks. But every year, says this old man, I continue, because I don't know how to stop. He offered me a spoonful of honey, extravagantly much, I thought at first. But then I understood this wasn't generosity. This was the way this man lives, the way he thinks, the way he sees the world. Nothing in tiny morsels, everything in large, generous portions, the way nature itself gives. And the honey on my tongue was, I can't describe it, it was too much all at once. It was sweet, yes, but it was also complex, like good music that has many layers that you only hear on the second and third listening, that you carry into dreams. It was the forest blossoms. It was millions of bees at their work. It was the patience of the beekeeper over nearly 50 years. It was the wisdom of generations, all together in this sweet, gleaming substance, the greatest gift nature could give. And then he said he'll be retiring soon. His hands can't work as well as they used to. His fingers are stiff from arthritis, but they still remember the movements. His eyes have grown weaker, and he no longer sees all the illnesses that afflict the bees. But one of his sons will take over the beekeeping. It's not the life the son would have chosen, said the old man with a sideways glance that shows he's proud. The son wanted to study computers, work in a city, in an office, with machines instead of nature. But in recent years, as the son helped his father more often with the work, as summer after summer passed, he began to understand the bees, began to see that this isn't an old trade, but a timeless one, that it requires knowledge no computer can replace, that it requires a heart. The train moves slower now, approaching Topolka station, and the old beekeeper packs his baskets again, and with each piece of luggage seems to go a piece of the summer into these bags. The scent of honey and summer still fills the small compartment, fills my clothes, fills my thoughts, will stay with me for many days. And I see how the old man stands, takes his luggage, and looks out the window at the lakes and fields, at the home he loves. And I see that he's smiling, and this smile isn't tired, though his body must be tired. From the long years of work, from the 1,000 small stinging wounds. It's the smile of someone who's spent his whole life doing something that mattered, that had meaning, that changed the world, even if no one sees it. And my eyes close, and I still taste the honey, and I still smell those blossoms and that sun. And the train soothes me with its rhythm. Clack, 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 clack. And I think of millions of bees working, loving their colony, and of an old man who spent his whole life with them, and of honey that's golden and sweet and carries the whole world within it. Slowly, warmly, falling asleep. A girl sits across from me on the line between Zakopane and Krakow, and the first thing I notice about her isn't her face, but her scarf. It's a thick, hand-knitted scarf in colors that shouldn't work together, a kind of dark blue, then a strip of cream, then dark blue again. But it works, you understand, it works perfectly. The scarf is so old that the colors have faded, and it looks as though it's already made 100 journeys, and now it's making another. You can see it's been worn, that it's lived, that the wool is soft from the hand of time. It's winter outside. The mountains around Zakopane are snow-white, and breath freezes on the windows. But the girl isn't wearing the scarf because it's cold. The train is warm, and the scarf could go unworn. But the girl wears it anyway. She wraps it tightly around her neck, as if she's embracing herself, as if she's giving herself courage. The girl is young, early 20s, I'd say. And she wears this scarf as if it's treasure. She's wrapped it around her neck, and it falls over her shoulders to her lap. Sometimes she pulls one end of the scarf over her face, not from cold, the train is warm, but from a kind of shyness. Her hair is dark brown, and it falls over her eyes when she looks down. She's not reading, she's not looking out the window. She's simply sitting with this scarf, as though she's waiting for something, or perhaps as though she's saying goodbye to something. At some point, she begins to stroke the scarf, her fingers tracing the texture of the knit, and I see her lips move very slightly, as if she's saying something or singing to herself, but very, very quietly. I try not to stare, but you become curious, you see, when you sit on trains for long periods. You observe these small details, and they tell the whole story. And I soon understood that this scarf wasn't just a scarf. It was a story she carried with her. It was a letter written in wool instead of words. The movement of the train is quiet and hypnotic. Clack, 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 clack. And the girl sways gently in this rhythm. Sometimes she pulls one end of the scarf over her face, not from cold, the train is warm, but from a kind of shyness, or perhaps from sorrow. I can't quite tell. Her hair is dark brown, and it falls over her eyes when she looks down. She's not reading, she's not looking out the window. She's simply sitting with this scarf, as though she's waiting for something, or perhaps as though she's saying goodbye to something. After an hour, or perhaps 2, time flows differently on trains. She looked up and saw that I'd been watching her, not angrily, but gently, with the patience of someone who knows old secrets. And she smiled, not much, just a small smile, and said, "My grandmother knitted this, for me, before she died. She couldn't see anymore, but she knitted, and I told her which color should come next, and she knitted until it was finished. That was 5 years ago. The scarf," she said, "was too precious to wear, too precious to ruin. So it lay in a box in her room, and she'd look at it sometimes, but she didn't wear it. But today," she said, "I'm traveling to visit my great-grandmother, my grandmother's mother, to see her one last time before she dies. She's 91 years old, and I thought, it's time to wear this scarf. It's time to use it, not hoard it. That's what my grandmother would have wanted me to do." And she showed me then how careful the stitches were, despite everything, even though the old woman couldn't see. The stitches were small and even and perfect, even when you looked very closely. And the girl said that her grandmother had taught her everything about patience and love, not with words, but with the movements of her hands. When you knit a scarf, you can't think, you just have to do. The hands know what to do, and the mind grows quiet, and suddenly you've created something without really knowing how it happened. The grandmother did this with her eyes closed, and the scarf turned out perfect anyway, because love can replace eyes. She spoke quietly and thoughtfully, and I listened, and I saw that this scarf wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was the entire relationship between a grandmother and a girl. It was all the time they'd spent together, all the stories that had been told, all the moments of happiness and being understood. And now the girl wore it, and in doing so, she carried her grandmother's love with her everywhere. Everywhere. She told me about her great-grandmother, the old woman she was going to visit. This woman had been a queen in her family, the girl said, not because she was rich, but because she was wise. She'd been a midwife before she retired, and she'd brought hundreds of babies into the world, babies who were now grandparents, babies who'd grown up and had children of their own and had grandchildren. The great-grandmother was the root of an enormous tree of people, all because she'd been there to support their arrival. And everyone she delivered had received her time, her patience, her full attention. That's what midwives did in those days. They weren't merely technical assistants. They were witnesses to the most important moments of a human life. And the girl said that this great-grandmother wanted all her great-great-grandchildren and great-great-grandsons to come say goodbye. And the girl was one of many, but she wanted to do something special. She wanted to wear something beautiful on the day she visited her great-grandmother, something that would show she was grateful, that this old woman had been a witness to her family, that she wanted to carry forward the chain of lives this great-grandmother had begun. And when I heard that, I suddenly understood why the scarf didn't look wrong on the girl, why there wasn't a flaw. There was no flaw, because hand-knitted things are never flawed. Every stitch is exactly right because it was made with love, with attention, with thoughts of the person who would wear it. That's the difference between handwork and machine work. In handwork sits the human soul. And in this scarf sat the soul of a grandmother who couldn't see, but who could see through her hands, through her love. The girl understood this, and that's why she wore the scarf like a precious stone, like a part of herself. The train travels through the snow-covered mountains of the Tatras, and the girl with the scarf still sits beside me, and I see how she closes her eyes, and I see how the movement of the train carries her slowly, slowly, toward dreams. The rhythm of the wheels grows quieter, or perhaps I simply can't hear it anymore because my eyes are closing too, and the scarf lies warm around her shoulders, the love of a dead grandmother, the love of an aging great-grandmother, all together in this thin, frayed, precious, knitted wool. In this way, the generations travel together on a train through the mountains. And my eyes close too. And I think of all the scarves that have been knitted, all the hands that worked, all the grandmothers and grandfathers of this world who wove their time into fabrics. And the train travels on into the mountains, slowly, warmly, and the scarf is still there, and the love is still there, and the girl sleeps. The train on the line from Reuter to Erwold was small and slow, like all trains that go into the truly high Alps, where the mountains grow so tall they seem to touch the sky. It was December, and the mountain was white, so white that your eyes hurt when you looked out at this endless expanse of snow and ice. I was the only passenger in the last carriage, and that was fine by me. I wanted to be alone with the mountains, alone with the silence. Then a woman boarded, tall, strong, with a face browned by sun and wind, dark as leather left in the sun for decades. She wore a thick coat of gray wool and boots with thick soles, boots that spoke of real work, of mountains, of ice, of stairs. She sat beside me, not because the carriage was full, not because she wanted company, but because she was tired. She leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes, as if she'd fall asleep at once. I could see she must be an innkeeper, a mountain innkeeper. That particular rare kind of woman who lives up on the mountains, who's there all year, who cooks and warms and comforts wanderers, who'd made the mountains her home, though the mountains were no easy, no gentle home. Her hands told her life story, scratches from knives, burn marks, stains that never went away, nails that spoke of great, continuous work. And in her face, even in sleep, I could see she knew who she was, that she'd accepted herself. After a while, somewhere between Reuter and Erwald, she opened her eyes and looked at me. She wasn't surprised that I was watching. "You're looking," she said, not really a question, but a statement. "Aren't you?" A smile, brief but real, not artificial. I was down in the town, getting supplies, flour, butter, cheese, tea, all the things that would be too heavy to make up there ourselves. It's tiring every time going down and then up, but the hut needs things, and the people need the hut. And she told me about her hut. Not a long, rambling story, no, just what was necessary, just the truth. She spoke of the wanderers who spent the night there, of all kinds of people from everywhere, of the beds she'd made herself with her own hands, wooden beds with mattresses she'd stuffed herself, of the soups she cooked from the simplest things, potatoes, turnips, dried herbs from her herb collection, fat from meat she'd cooked herself. People come, she said, not for luxury. They come to experience the mountains, to conquer them, or understand them, or love them. And when they're tired in the evening, completely exhausted, then they need a warm place, a bed, hot food. That's what the hut gives. It wasn't a long story. She spoke little, only what was necessary, but every word had weight. But in those few words, in the way she spoke, I could see what her life was, a life completely oriented to the mountains, a life oriented by the seasons, rhythmic as nature itself. It wasn't easy, I could see that from her hands, from the lines in her face, from the quiet strength in her voice. But it was, and you could see clearly, fulfilling. It was complete. It was enough. She got off at Erwald without a great farewell. She took her bags of supplies. They were heavy, but she carried them as if that were normal, and she walked out into the snow, out toward the mountain. I watched her straighten up, as if she were already preparing for the climb, for the journey back to the hut, for the work waiting there. And I thought, this is a complete person. This is someone who knows exactly who they are and who has accepted it, fully. And I still think of her now, of this innkeeper, though years have passed, of the mountain innkeeper with the brown face and the working hands, no longer young, but not yet old, simply working. And when I see people searching for meaning, for fulfillment, for a place they belong, for a life worth the effort, then I think of her and think, you could have a hut, you could have a mountain, you could serve people, warm them, feed them, comfort them, and that could be your life, and that could be enough. It is enough. She told me before she got off. Actually, she didn't say it directly, but it was a thought I read in her gaze, that happiness doesn't have to be big, that fulfillment doesn't have to be loud, that a life that's meaningful doesn't have to appear in the newspaper, doesn't have to be famous, doesn't have to be photographed. A life can be meaningful if you simply get up tomorrow, and you make your bed, and you light the fire, and you cook soup, and you expect people, and you warm them. That's all. That's enough. That's all you need to live a good life. And I thought of the hut, in my imagination, what it would look like. The snow outside, thick and white everywhere. The windows small and warm, with light from a fire shining out the window into the darkness. The door open for tired wanderers. The rooms full of people, all with red cheeks, all warm, all safe. And the innkeeper, always moving, always working, but always with a smile, always with warmth. This isn't a big life, this isn't a famous life, but it's a real life. A life that counts, a life that makes a difference every day for every person who comes through the door. I'll never see this innkeeper again. I'll probably never travel this route again, not to Airwald, not on this train, not in this December. But that's all right. That's not important. What matters is that I saw her, that I shared a moment with her, a moment of understanding, a moment where two people, an old man and an innkeeper, understood that life isn't about success, not about fame, not about the big things. It's about accepting yourself, knowing who you are and being content with it. Loving yourself, quite simply, without drama, without makeup, without lies. The train travels on. The wheels rattle. Clack, 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 clack. And I sit and think of the innkeeper, and I sleep. The mountains are white. The hut is warm up there. And somewhere up there, somewhere in the heights, in the cold, the innkeeper cooks soup for tired people, prepares beds, awaits the next wanderers. And the innkeeper, I think she'll continue up in the hut, year after year, December after December, winter after winter. She'll continue cooking soups, she'll continue making beds, she'll continue receiving wanderers and warming them, and letting them sleep, and seeing them off the next morning with a warm breakfast. That's her life. That's enough. That's her masterpiece, her great work. Not a statue, not a book, not a symphony, but a life, lived with love, with care, with attention. And I dream of warmth, of hut fires, of a woman who knows everything, who can do everything, who is perfect in her work. It was an autumn evening on the line from Kassel to Göttingen when the weather suddenly turned. The sky had been gray, but not threatening, more gray like an old suit than gray like a storm. The air smelled of earth and damp leaves. Then, somewhere near Hessisch-Lichtenau, the drops began. At first hesitantly, as if someone were knocking and not sure anyone was home. Then increasingly direct, increasingly loud. The window began to fog, small streams of rain running down. And then I heard it properly. The sound of rain on the metal roofs of the station. We'd just stopped, and I could see the roof over the platform, corrugated metal, silvery and old, gleaming in the rain like a drumhead. The sound wasn't gentle. No, it was rhythmic and wild, almost playful, like a child hammering on an old drum. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. A pattern that was no routine, but wild, irregular, alive, as if the metal itself were dancing with the rain. Rain on metal roofs is different from rain on other things. It's not the gentle, romantic patter on a roof of shingles or tiles. It's not the quiet, almost imperceptible dripping on damp earth. It's acoustic. It gets amplified, enlarged, brought to life. The metal resonates, the metal sings. The metal speaks a language that only comes alive in the rain. Every single drop becomes an event, a tiny blow, a tone, a note in a symphony. And together, 100 drops per second, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Together, they create a concert that needs no composition, that writes itself. An older man in a gray suit sat beside me. I wouldn't have noticed he was there if he hadn't moved. He seemed to hear the rain too, because he put down his book that he was reading and leaned back as if surrendering to the music. His face was thoughtful, peaceful, bearing the lines of a man who has heard much, who has lived much. And we sat there, both of us, in this moment, in silence, whilst the rain fell on the metal. He glanced at me briefly, and I saw that he was smiling, not a broad smile, but one that came from the depths, a smile of recognition. Yes, this is beautiful, this sound, this music, this moment. The rain lasted about 20 minutes. Not long, as it turned out later when I checked my watch, but in those 20 minutes, during the rat-a-tat-tat on the metal, whilst the train sat still like an animal listening to music, whilst the world outside the window disappeared into water and gray light. In those minutes, everything was perfect. There was no hurry, no destination, no agenda. There was only the sound and the peace. I thought about what this rain meant. It came from above, from the sky I couldn't see. It wanted to go nowhere. It simply fell, because that's what rain does. What rain has always done since the beginning of time. And when it fell on the metal, it became music. And when it flowed from the metal downward, it became water in the earth, water in the rivers, water in the Mosel that flowed past here. A cycle, a journey, a song without end. The man in the suit finally said something. The words came very slowly, as if he wasn't sure he should speak, as if speaking were a violation of this music. "This is one of the things," he said, "that I miss, since most stations have gotten concrete canopies or these modern plastic structures, this rain on metal. Now it just rushes away over plastic or modern materials, clean and newfangled materials. It's not the same. It doesn't sing." And I understood completely what he meant. It's a kind of beauty that's lost with progress. Not that progress is bad. No, it's necessary, it's good. But there's a quiet sorrow in it, that the simple things, the free things, the sensory quality of sounds and experiences, that these disappear, that they're erased. They're replaced by more efficient, better, quieter, modern things. But these new things weren't worse. No, they were just older, less mysterious. The rain began to let up. The rat-a-tat-tat became slower, more irregular. Then it stopped altogether. The train whistled, and we moved on. The man in the suit picked his book back up, but I saw he wasn't reading. He was looking out at the wet world, at the fields gleaming silver from the rain. And his smile was still there. Now, when I hear rain on metal, and that's become rarer, much rarer, I think of that moment, of the man in the suit, of his quiet sorrow over the lost things, of the simple joy of hearing sounds that mean the rain is falling, that the earth is drinking, that the world continues to breathe and live. Rain on Metal is a song, an old song, perhaps one of the oldest songs we humans can hear. And I'm glad, very glad, that I heard it, on that autumn evening, on that line between Kassel and Göttingen, before it disappeared completely. And sometimes I think, not often, but sometimes, that progress is it. That the new materials, the plastic canopies, the modern structures, that these are better, more practical, more efficient. That the world is better when everything is clean and quiet and orderly. But I'm not sure that's true. I think we lost something. Not something big, not something with a name, but something subtle, something sensory. The music of Rain on Metal is not practical, no, it's not necessary, but it's beautiful. And sometimes, if I'm honest, I think that beauty is just as necessary as practicality, that music is just as necessary as efficiency. that the rain on metal teaches us something that modern stations cannot teach. The man in the suit, he understood it. He knew that the world was changing, that the old things were disappearing. But he wasn't angry about it. He was just sad. A quiet, accepting sorrow. The kind of sorrow an old man has, who's seen much, who's lost much, who knows that loss is part of life. And his strategy wasn't to fight, not to resist, but simply to remember, simply to sit and hear the sound while it was still there, and to take what it was, a moment of beauty in a changing world. The train travels on. The wheels rattle. Clack, 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 clack. And the rain no longer falls, but I still hear it in my ears, in my heart. The old song. Rat-a-tat-tat on the old metal. The music of the past. And sometimes, yes, sometimes, when it rains, when I'm in my flat, I stand by the window and I try to hear. I try to feel whether the metal is still there, whether the old stations still exist, whether the sound still exists somewhere. And sometimes, very quietly, very subtly, I can still hear it. Not really, not physically, no, it's in my heart, in my memory, in the space in between present and past. The rat-a-tat-tat, the old song, the music that's no longer played but that still lives in the minds of old people like me who remember it, who heard it before it disappeared. And I sink into sleep. The sound of the rain carries me. The rat-a-tat-tat. It rocks me. Soft and dark, sheltered, sleeping in the music. It was an April morning, and the sun hadn't quite risen when I boarded the train on the line from Trier to Koblenz, on the way back, you might say. The platform was cool, the air still fresh with the night. The route wasn't the fastest. There were detours along the Moselle, small villages, slow stops. But I took it anyway because I knew that the light at this time of year, at this hour of the day, at this moment of dusk, was something special, something that doesn't last. The light of dusk before the sun really gains power over the world. And it was truly there, this light. It wasn't white, not yellow like morning light would be later. It was soft. That's the only word that fits, soft. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. It seemed to come from the sky itself, not from the sun, but from the earth just beginning to glow. The sky was a glowing gray with a trace of rose in it, a trace of violet, a trace of something undefined. And everything this light touched, the trees at the edge of the rails, the houses in the villages, the Moselle itself, the water, everything became soft, mysterious, as if reality were just beginning to become real, as if the world were remembering who it was. I sat leaning against the window and watched how the dusk slowly transformed into morning. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, minute by minute, second by second. The light grew brighter. The colors shifted continuously. The violet disappeared, became blue, became light blue. The rose became yellow, became white. The gray tones became individual, definable colors. The sky, the trees, the earth, each with its own color. But in these minutes, in these transitional moments, before the separation was complete, it was perfect. It was the kind of beauty that doesn't last, that barely exists, that you can only see if you're attentively awake, if you don't turn your eye away. I wasn't alone in the compartment. There was a young woman reading. She was one of those people completely absorbed in their books on trains, as if the world outside the window didn't exist at all. She wore a brown jumper and had her hair pinned up. A reader, a traveler, a person who traveled with me in this dusk, though she didn't know it. Her book was old, well read, with corners curling upward. She read concentratedly, her eyes following the lines. But at some point, I noticed it because her eye moved away from the book, because her shoulder posture changed, because she suddenly became very still. She noticed the light, too. She slowly lowered her book. She looked out. And in that moment, we saw it together, this soft light, this dusk transforming into morning. She looked at me, and I looked at her, and we smiled, not because of something someone had said, not because of a conversation, but because of this shared moment of understanding. It was as if the light itself connected us, as if it knew us both.
The light of dusk is different from evening light, you see. Morning dusk has hope in it. It has the feeling that something is beginning, that the world is opening. Evening light has melancholy, a feeling that something is ending, that the world is closing. But this morning light here, at this hour, in April, when the world was beginning to grow green again, when the blossoms were starting, it had both, hope and farewell, new beginning and remembrance. It was the light of a threshold, a place in between. I thought of all the people who'd already traveled this route since trains existed, of all the mornings they'd experienced this light with, or not experienced it. Perhaps they were sleeping, perhaps they were too busy with their thoughts, with their worries. And here was I, an old man, a traveler, a man who had much time, who hadn't missed this moment, who had the patience to wait for the sun to rise, to see what the light would do on the way, who sat at the window and simply looked, without claim, without expectation. And I was grateful for this soft light, for the young woman who saw it with me and understood what it meant, for the train carrying me through this moment whilst the world woke and grew green. There's something about twilight light that changes you. It makes you subtle. It takes away your sharpness, your edges. It makes you soft, like the light itself. You become part of it if you look long enough. You become part of the transformation, the slow change from one world to another. And I felt that morning. I felt myself growing softer, dissolving into the light, as if the light were absorbing me, preserving me, transforming me. Then, sometime after Koblenz, I don't know exactly when, I lost time in the light. I lost myself too. The light became normal. It became the light of a morning like any other morning, bright, white, practical, every day. The mystery was over. The threshold was crossed. And the young woman returned to her book. The pages had advanced. But I saw that she sometimes looked out, searching for something of that soft light that had just disappeared, that had just passed. That's what's special about this kind of light. The twilight light, the early morning light, before the sun really rules. It gives you permission to dream, permission to not quite be here, not quite in your body yet, not quite in this world yet. You're still half in sleep, still half in dream. And the world outside, it's also still half in dream, half in sleep. Everything is soft, everything is possible, everything could still become different. But then, blindingly fast, the sun comes and everything becomes hard, everything becomes clear, everything becomes definite. And the possibilities become realities, and the dreams become facts or are forgotten. I thought of all the mornings in my life, all the times I woke up and quickly rushed into my day. I never saw this light. I never experienced this threshold, this dusk, this moment in between. I was always too busy, too hurried, too finished. And I don't regret that now. Not regret, no, that's the wrong word. I'm grateful instead. I'm grateful that I see these moments now, now that I'm older, now that I have time, now that I'm slower. Time has given me this gift, the ability to see the soft light, the ability to wait, the ability to not do, but only to be. And now, when I think of that morning, when I close my eyes, I can still see the light. I can't describe it, not really. It's too soft, too subtle, too private, too fleeting. But I can see it clearly. Gray, rose, violet, blue, yellow. A transition from one world to another, from night to day, from rest to activity. A moment when the dusk still wasn't finished, when the morning hadn't quite properly begun. Just a moment in between, a moment of possibility, a moment when everything was possible. A moment of pure existence, without time, without haste. The train travels on. The wheels rattle. Clack, 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 clack. And I'm so tired and so fulfilled. I saw the light. It was truly beautiful. It was enough. It was all I needed. And now I close my eyes, and the soft light is still there, inside me. It carries me gently into sleep, soft, warm, loving, like hands rocking me. It was a February morning, very early, still dark, really, when I boarded the train on the line from St. Anton to Landeck, Austria, high in the Alps, where winter doesn't end, but only grows colder the higher you climb. The platform was frozen, covered with a thin layer of ice that gleamed like glass. The air was so cold that it hurt when you breathed it in, not just metaphorically, but physically, like tiny needles in your airways. It was the kind of cold that tells you, you don't belong here. You're a guest in a world older than you. The compartment wasn't heated. Not really. I noticed it at once as I stepped inside and closed the door. There was an old stove in the corner, but it worked wearily, without strength, as if it too suffered under the cold. The windows were frozen shut, completely opaque, the frames too rigid from cold to move. And in this cold, I saw my breath. White clouds rising before my face every time I breathed, slowly, visibly, undeniably. Small mists that dissolved in the air, gone like thoughts, like memories. My life made of breath clouds. It's strange to see your own breath. Normally it's invisible, taken for granted. You breathe without noticing, like your heart beats, like your blood flows. But here, in this intense cold, it was suddenly present, visible, real. With each breath, I could see my body in a way. I could see that I was alive, that I was warm, that I existed here in this frozen world outside the window. Breath is life, you understand. Breath is the first proof when a child is born, and the last when we go. Breath is all that counts. I thought of all the moments in my life when I didn't breathe, when I held my breath, from fear, from excitement, from love. And I thought, that's the first sign you're alive, that you're present, that you exist. When you breathe, you're here. When you don't breathe, you're gone. And here, in this compartment, in this cold, where every breath was visible, where I became witness to my own life, in every white mist, in every proof of my existence, then I couldn't deny that I'm here, that I'm a body made of flesh and bone and warmth. A small fire trying to defeat the cold, only through breathing, only through the relentless pumping of my lungs, only through the simple, unconscious, natural act of breathing. In the compartment sat an older woman, still and inward, lost in her own thoughts. She wore a thick wool coat, a grayish-brown thing that had traveled with her for decades. You could see it, the age, the wear.
but also the quality, the durability. Her hands were wrapped in a hand-knitted scarf, white with red stripes, and she breathed, too. I saw it, her breath clouds mixing with mine in the cold room. We didn't speak to one another, not a word, but it was as though we were having a dialogue through our breath, cloud for cloud, proof of life for proof of life. Two bodies, one cold, two separate streams of warmth. She got off at some point. I think Utstal, but I wasn't sure because I didn't look out. I was too absorbed in the breath clouds. And then I was alone in the compartment, alone with my breath and the cold and the sounds of the train. The train climbed higher, ever higher, through the alpine passes, over passes with names that sounded like ghosts. And the cold grew more intense, almost heavy, as if it were physically pressing down on me. My breath became thicker, whiter, more dramatic, no longer just clouds, but almost like smoke. I could almost see how my life was departing, how my warm body fought the cold, inch by inch, breath by breath. There was something soothing about it, the simplicity of the situation. You're cold, your body produces heat, the heat rises, it forms a mist, the mist disappears. An endless cycle, a loop of life and heat expenditure. It wasn't about grand philosophy, it was just physical, natural. The rhythm of nature reduced to its simplest expression. I leaned my head against the frozen window, carefully, so my breath didn't immediately create a thick layer of ice there. Though, to be honest, it did anyway. My warm breath creating ice, life forming ice. The paradox of heat and cold mixed together. There's something profound in that. I thought of all the people who'd ridden this route in winter. Yes, ridden, before trains, before 150 years ago. On horses, in open carriages, their breath clouds mixing with the breath clouds of the animals, with the steam of the horse's breath. People and nature inseparably connected, fighting the same cold, breathing into the same icy air. And now I sit here on a train, breathing the same breath as they did. The continuity of human existence, from horse to railway, still breathing. The color of my breath. I followed it with my eyes as it rose. White, but not quite white. Gray, too, a bit. With a trace of blue when the light hit right, when the sun behind the mountains tried to shine. And then it disappeared completely, as if it dissolved into the air, as if it became part of the mountains. Proof of my existence dissolving. And then the next breath came, and again a proof. A new beginning with every breath. Life is so short, so fleeting, like these breath clouds, and yet so continuous, so reliable. Always a next breath, still alive, still breathing. And I suddenly understood, very deeply, that this is the rhythm of life. Not the big moments, not love, not death, not successes and failures. No, it's this simple rhythm. Breath in, breath out. Breath in, breath out. Again and again, without ceasing, without thought, without choice. Life isn't dramatic. Life is very simple. Life is only breath. And as long as I breathe, I'm here. And as long as I'm here, I mean something. I warm the air. I prove that humanity still lives, that the universe is still present, that existence still continues. With every breath, I say to the world, I am here, I am real, I matter. The train reached Landeck at midday, though midday up here didn't really look like midday, more like a late dawn. The sun tried to shine, but the mountains were too high, too mighty to let it through. It was still dark, still cold, still the world of breath clouds. I stepped out and was immediately overwhelmed by the altitude, the place, the seriousness of this location at the edge of civilization, at the edge of the habitable world. My breath rose up again, another proof that I was still here, that my body still fought this cold. But I'd also become quiet. I was ready to stay, to linger, to understand what this cold taught me.
Now, on the way back, I still think of that day, of the breath clouds, of the cold, which wasn't hostile but honest. It simply told you the truth. You're alive, and you warm the air around you just by existing. Your body is a fire, small and delicate, but there. And this idea comforts me. In every cold, in every winter, in every moment of darkness, I'm here. My breath says so. And I think, too, of all the other people I've seen on trains, who breathed like me, who produced their small breath clouds unconsciously, automatically. A young man with a nervous look, trying to understand his life. An old woman remembering her earlier life. A child sleeping and dreaming of adventures. All breathed. All warmed the air around them with their existence. All were fire in the cold. And I thought, that's what connects us all. Not language, not culture, not appearance, but breath. The fundamental biological proof that we're all alive, that we're all here, that we all matter in the smallest, deepest, most inexpressible way. And now, in the warm train, I close my eyes and I still see the breath clouds before me. White, gray, blue, disappearing. My life made visible. My life that breathes, breathes, breathes. And every breath is a verse in a song only I sing. A song made of heat and cold and existence. My breath is the music, and the music is my life. The train carries me on, and my breath grows slower, becomes quieter, becomes rhythmic like the rattle of the wheels. And the breath clouds grow softer, less visible, almost invisible now. But they're there, still there, my life continuing with every heartbeat. And I sink into sleep. My breath grows even slower, becomes sleep, becomes dream, and I'm everywhere and nowhere at once. In the Alps and on the train, cold and warm, alive. It was a snowy December evening when I boarded a very old train. The line from Winterberg to Brilon, not the main route, you see, but the regional small line through the Sauerland. A train that still dated from the 60s. You'd have seen it immediately, felt it at once had you stepped aboard. The seats weren't modern, not comfortable by today's standards, but they were honest. The wood was dark and worn smooth, polished by millions of hands over decades. Workers, commuters, children on school trips, old women heading to market. The platform had been nearly empty when I boarded. A man with a briefcase, a mother with a child. The snowfall grew heavier as I found myself a seat. I chose the rear compartment, the one furthest from the door. Here it was quietest, most intimate, and here I could hear the crackling best. And then, the crackling. It was the sound of the train itself, not the rhythm of the wheels. No, that was something else. It was the wood, the metal sheets, the connections of the carriage, working in the cold, adjusting, holding their tension, and releasing it. As if the whole train were having a conversation with itself, a very old conversation, in a language only old things know. Creak. Crackle. A soft snapping that wasn't dangerous, but natural, old. The sound of something that lives and feels its years. The windows were frosted. I could scratch a hole with my finger if I wanted to, but I didn't. That seemed a violation, interrupting the peace of the winter night.
Outside, it was already dark, and the snow fell, lightly, slowly, almost like a dream, as if the night itself were dreaming. But inside the carriage, it was dry and warm. The stove in the middle was doing its work, warming the cold bones of the train and the cold bones of the two men inside. And as the train moved, as we traveled through the night, this old train, it sang. Yes, sang is the right word. A song made of wood and metal and time. There was another man in the compartment, an older gentleman, perhaps my age or older, gray beard, alert look despite the weariness. He sat reading a newspaper, but he wasn't really reading. His eyes were closed, his thoughts elsewhere. He started as the train began to move, as if he'd been waiting for that sound. And then I heard him smile, subtly, but it was there. A smile only someone who loved this train would have. I asked him, "Beautiful train, isn't it?" And he turned to me, and his smile grew deeper. "Yes," he said. "The last of its kind on this route. Next year it'll be retired. Then comes one of these modern plastic trains. Efficient, clean, without history." That made it even more beautiful to hear it. And to know that I was hearing this music, perhaps for the last time. The train knew its ending, not consciously, of course, but it was there, in every crackle, in every creak of the wood. A farewell that was no drama, just reality. The train had lived, it had carried people through decades, it had heard stories, laments of love, homecomings, departures. It had carried dreams from people sitting by the window looking out at the passing world. And now, in the last winter of its time, it was here, with me, with this other man who knew it better than some people know their spouses, with the snow outside and the darkness and the deep crackling of its old bones. And it was right. It was complete. A life ending, but not with sorrow, but with a kind of gentleness, with dignity, the pride of something that did what it was meant to do, the peace of someone who's completed their work. The man told me he'd taken this train for 25 years, that he recognized it immediately upon boarding from the smell, old wood mixed with oil and something ineffable, something only this train had. "You grow old with something," he said, "and it becomes part of you. You know its quirks, you know its sounds. You know when rain's coming because the train makes a particular sound. You know which seats are warmest, which windows close best, where the door sticks." And I understood completely, even though I was riding this train for the first time. We sat there, in the warmth, as the train traveled over the rails, and the crackling continued. Crackle, creak, crackle, like a clock that's not quite accurate anymore, but still reliable. Sometimes there were long pauses between sounds. Then a whole barrage came, as if the train were debating with itself. The snowflakes pattered against the windows, melted there instantly, disappeared into water, the interior heat dissolved. And this old train carried us into the night, with all its secret sounds, with all its private conversations. It's strange how much we become attached to things. To people, yes, I always understood that. But to a train? To a wooden compartment with worn seat covers? To the specific way a lamp flickers or the particular temperature of a heating pipe? And yet, yes, life isn't just the big moments. It's these small continuities, these familiar sounds that tell you you're home. These places you visit again and again until they become part of your mind, until they know you, until you know them like your own heart. Then, somewhere between Winterberg and Brylan, I sank back into thought. The crackling grew quieter, or perhaps I heard it less consciously. It became the background, the music playing whilst you sleep. The other man had long since dozed off, His newspaper lay on his lap, and his head rested gently against the window frame. I watched as the snow seemed to blow through his hair. Not really, but it looked that way because the snowflakes passed by on the other side of the window. And the train, this old, glorious train, traveled on through the snowy night with its 2 passengers, with its 100 years of memory. Now, all these years later, I still sometimes think of that night, of the crackling, of the snow, of the man whose name I never knew, but whose love for this train I understood at once. It was a love, quiet, not sentimental, but present, current. And I imagine that this train, somewhere in a depot or on a siding, still crackles quietly, that it still speaks to itself even if no one listens, that it still carries the stories it has heard. The train I sit in now has different sounds. It's modern, efficient, almost soulless. That's not meant unkindly, it's simply so. Things have changed. Everything becomes faster, cleaner, better. But sometimes I wonder if better is really better. And yet, when I close my eyes, I still hear the crackling from back then. I hear it, and I'm young enough again to have time, to just listen. To understand that the most beautiful moments aren't the ones where something big happens, but the ones where nothing big happens. The crackling, the snowflake, the warmth of the carriage. And I sink slowly into sleep as the train carries me, this old train and all trains that ever were, all together, crackling, whispering, rocking. I remember Landshut Station from a time before mobile phones were everywhere, before people started looking only at their screens. It was a summer day, sometime in the 90s, when I was waiting there for my connection. The train to Regensburg was delayed, the voice over the loudspeaker said, at least half an hour. So I went out to the platform, away from the crowd in the waiting room, to where it was quieter, where you could see the sky. There was an old corner of the station, beside the forgotten waiting shelter, a flower bed. Just flowers that someone had planted, or perhaps they had come by themselves from seeds the wind had carried. Forget-me-nots and red mallows, yellow calendulas with their simple, open faces like little suns. A gardener wouldn't have done it, so disordered as it looked, but that was precisely what was beautiful. It was wild and random and alive. The leaves were dusty from train traffic, from exhaust fumes, but the blossoms glowed anyway, as if each petal were warm from inside. And around these flowers, the hum. Not loud, not obtrusive, a steady, warm hum, as if the air itself was beginning to sing. They were bees, of course. Not very many, perhaps 10 or 15. They went from flower to flower with that serious calm that only bees have. The summer was hot. You could feel the heat rising from the tar of the platform, and I noticed how the warmth rose from the stones, how the air above the platform shimmered and flickered. And this hum, it was like a prayer you don't hear, only feel. It was a sound you could feel in your bones. Every bee knew exactly where it needed to go. No hurry, no questions, no uncertainty. Just the craft, the work that has been done the same way since the beginning of the world. I stood there, perhaps 30 minutes, and did nothing. I watched as one bee disappeared into a mallow, deep into the red petals, and came back out, its legs full of golden pollen. The dust gleamed in the sun like jewelry, like tiny crumbs of gold. The heat of the midday sun was really intense now, but in this heat there was something good, something that made time transparent. And I thought, of all the places this one bee would fly tomorrow, of all the other blossoms, all the other valleys, of the harvest that would someday become honey from this one station flower bed. Not in this station, certainly not, but somewhere in Bavaria, in a beehive behind a farmhouse, in an apiary in the hills. Part of something bigger that would keep going on long after me. It is strange how time works when you watch instead of think. Half an hour doesn't feel like 30 minutes. It feels like moments that overlap, that dissolve into each other. The bees didn't notice me at all. I was as unimportant to them as a stone. But that was good, you know? It gave me the freedom to simply be here, simply watch how the small world of flowers functioned, completely independent of me. The man sitting on the other side of the waiting shelter gave me a quick look. He was older than me, perhaps in his 70s, with work gloves and a faded blue shirt that spoke of work, of real hands that had known earth. A gardener, as it turned out later. Not the stations, just another traveler like me. But he smiled a small, quiet smile, the kind of smile that says, "I understand. I see it too." We didn't speak to each other. We stood there, two men, and simply watched how the bees did their work. The heat of the day. It was the kind of heat that teaches patience. Everything was slow and soft. The bees, their movements, the flowers opening and closing again. My thoughts gradually weakening, like water evaporating. The station itself seemed to sleep, despite all the arrivals and departures around it. I heard an announcement, but it sounded very far away, as if someone were speaking in another life. I saw a fly pass by, unimportant, hasty, nervous, and then the bee again, still concentrated, still patiently at its work. Which of the two, I thought, was really in a hurry? Which of the two was really living? Then came an announcement. The train was arriving earlier than expected, and I stood up as if surfacing from water and brushed dust from my trousers. I went back to the platform, but not without looking back one more time at the flower bed. The bees were still there, of course. They would probably be there for a long time, until the heat lessened and the sun sank lower. And I took this rhythm with me, this hum that doesn't stop even when the world turns and the train goes on. The man said something to me on the platform before we boarded, in that quiet, familiar tone that people have when they have stood together in stillness. That should have been seen, shouldn't it? And I nodded, and we didn't need to say more. He got on the same carriage, too, but in a different compartment. I didn't see him again later. Sometimes the most beautiful encounters are the ones that don't become friendships, because they are completely whole in that one moment. Just the flower bed and the hum. That was enough. You know, I still think of it today when I hear bees humming. It has become a different sound since then. It is not just nature, not just the work they do. It is a memory that the world is slower than we think, that patience is not inactivity, that a station, this loud, restless place, can suddenly become the holiest place if you just stand still and listen. On the train to Regensburg, I sat by the window and leaned my head against the glass. It was cool, the glass, a good contrast to the heat outside. The train hums, too, in its own way. The rhythm of the wheels, the roar of the engine, a deep vibration that goes through your whole body. Not like the hum of the bees, but related, a life that goes on, a work that fulfills itself. Flower by flower, station by station, Landshut, Regensburg, and everything has meaning, even if you only see one moment of it. I close my eyes now, and this hum is still there, in my ears, in my heart. It is warm, it is old. It is the whole world made small into a flower bed at Landshut station. And it tells me, stay a while longer. Forget time, forget the journey, forget who you are. Listen to the life humming before you. It is not in a hurry. Neither should you be. you can trust. The bees trust too. They don't ask if it is right. They just do their work. The train goes on. The wheels rattle. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. And I am so tired and satisfied, so warm. The hum grows quieter, quieter. It becomes one with the rattle of the wheels. And I forget where I am. I forget if I am traveling or standing. Only the hum is there, golden, warm, and the rattle becomes the hum. Or perhaps it always was one. The hum becomes a dream. The flowers open in my eyes, even though they are closed. The bees are no longer dancing now. They are just here, near me, warm. And I am also here, at the station, on the train, in the hum, sleeping, sleeping. I met the night watchman on a train late in the evening, on a small route through Franconia. The train was nearly empty, just him and me and the rattle of the wheels and the night, which had wrapped itself around the train like a dark cloak. It was one of those moonless nights when the darkness is so complete you feel you could touch it, soft and warm and velvety, like cloth woven from night itself. He was a man in his 70s, slim and upright, with a thin face and eyes that had grown accustomed to darkness the way a cat's eyes do. He wore a long black coat and a broad-brimmed hat, and at his belt hung a lantern, an old brass lantern that he obviously didn't carry as decoration. It was used and dented, and had a soot on the glass that spoke of 100 nights. He noticed my gaze on the lantern and laughed, a quiet, dark laugh that fitted the night like the moon fits the sky. "Night Watchman," he said, 30 years, in Rottenburg ob der Tauber. Do you know Rottenburg? The town that looks as though someone froze the Middle Ages and put it in a snow globe. Half-timbered houses and cobblestones and city walls and towers. And at night, when the tourists sleep, the town belongs to me. Then it belongs to the night watchman. Then it belongs to the night. He told me about his rounds. Every evening, he said, at 10 o'clock my round begins. Lantern in hand and key at my belt and eyes wide open even though everything's dark. I walk through the lanes, past houses with dark windows, past fountains that splash quietly, past churches whose towers stand black against the sky. And I listen to the town, to every sound, every step, every creak. The town speaks at night, you see. It creaks and groans and sighs, like an old person settling to rest. The beams in the half-timbered houses work. The roof tiles click softly in the wind. The flags on the towers flutter, and the stones in the walls, heated during the day, slowly release their warmth. You can feel it if you place your hand on the wall. Warm, so warm, as though the town were breathing. He told me about the hours between midnight and dawn. Those are the quiet hours, he said, the hours most people sleep through, the hours when the world rests and gathers strength for the new day. And in those hours, the darkness is deepest and most beautiful. It's not threatening. It's not cold. It's like an embrace, like a blanket drawn over the world, like a voice saying, "Sleep now. Rest. I'm watching." I asked if he was ever afraid. In the darkness, alone, in the empty lanes of a medieval town. And he shook his head, firmly and calmly, and said, "Afraid? No. Darkness doesn't frighten me. The night is my friend. I've known her for 30 years, and she's never let me down." People are afraid of darkness because they can't see. But I've learned that in darkness, you see differently. You see with your ears, with your nose, with your skin. You hear the wind sweeping round corners. You smell the rain before it falls. You feel the temperature changing, the moisture rising. You learn to trust the night. And when you trust it, it shows you things you'd never see in daylight. "What things?" I asked, and he leaned forward, like someone sharing a secret, and said, "The stars, for instance. You only see them at night. The owls gliding silently over the rooftops. The mist rising from the Tauber Valley and spreading through the lanes like a white river. The moon climbing over the city wall and turning everything silver. And the silence, the true silence that only exists when the world sleeps. A silence so perfect you hear your own heartbeat. And in this silence, you see, that's where you find yourself. That's where you hear thoughts that are drowned out in the day's noise. Where you feel feelings that have no chance in daylight. The night is where we're most honest, most ourselves. I asked what the night had taught him over all those years, and he touched his lantern tenderly, as though it were a living thing, and said, "The night protects those who understand it. That's its lesson. Most people see only darkness in the night, only absence. But the night isn't the absence of light. The night is something in its own right, something whole, something with its own beauty and its own purpose. Without the night, there's no sleep. Without sleep, there's no awakening. Without darkness, there are no stars. The night isn't an end. It's a beginning. Every night is the beginning of a new day. And whoever understands the night, whoever doesn't fear it, but welcomes it, finds in it something daylight can't give. Rest, depth, peace." He got off at a small station, so dark you could barely see the platform. He pulled his hat lower, took his lantern, and walked into the night as though going home. And perhaps he was. Perhaps the night was his home, the way the forest is home to the animals and the water is home to the fish. The night protects those who understand it. I think of that now, in this train, in this night. Of his lantern, carrying a small, warm light into the darkness. Of his voice, as quiet as the silence he described. Of the embrace of the night, which isn't threatening, but warm and soft and full of promise. The train carries on, and the night is there, close, warm, like a blanket of velvet. And the rattle grows quieter now, and the darkness is kind, and my eyes close, and I let the night in. Let it enfold me, the way the Night Watchman described. An embrace, a protection, a beginning, not an ending, but a beginning. I met the boy on the line from Limburg to Wetzlar, a line through Hesse, through the lovely lawn valleys, where it is summer, deepest, hottest summer, and the world smells of green grass, of cool river water, of endless hope, endless potential. The train was half full, peaceful, almost boring, but not for him. He sat in the best seat, the window seat, the best compartment for a true reader, and he read. He worked, concentrated. A thick book, heavy, old, worn, with torn corners from many hands, from many other readers perhaps, and his young eyes were completely, absolutely lost in the pages, in the words, in the dream. Completely lost, completely present, completely there. Not here, there. He was young, perhaps 10, perhaps 12, with thin arms and a concentrated face, not beautiful, not particularly, not striking, just completely present, just there, in the book, in this other world, in this kingdom. The world outside the window, the green valleys, the small rivers, the red roofs of villages, all was forgotten to him. There was only the pages, the words, the dream. The title of the book was The Lord of the Rings. In German, Herr der Ringe. The Hobbit trilogy, the classic. A thick book, 1,000 pages at least, perhaps more, and he was in the middle of it. Hundreds and hundreds of pages already read, and he was completely, utterly captivated by the story. I could see the way he turned the page, quick, impatient, hungry, the way his eyes followed the lines, how quick, how concentrated, how lost. The gaze of someone, a child, who is drinking, who is hungry, who needs another world. I didn't want to disturb. You don't disturb a reader. But I couldn't quite resist. I asked, quietly, almost a whisper, "Do you like the book? Are you enjoying it?" And he looked up, not impatiently, not angrily, but really surprised, as if waking from a dream, from another world. His eyes came back to the present. "Yes," he said, quite simply, quite honestly. It is the best story ever. The best. I am in Middle-earth now. I am with Frodo. I am there, with them, in the adventure." And I understood. In that moment, I understood the magic of books. That is the eternal power of storytelling. That is why books are immortal, why they will never die. A boy sits on a train through the German summer countryside, but his soul, his heart, his spirit, they are in Middle-earth. His soul is on a great adventure. His soul is Frodo, is a hobbit, is a small person who must do something great. His soul is absolutely free. He told me that his father gave him the book on his 12th birthday. A gift, a meaningful gift. "You are too old for children's books now," his father said to him, serious, loving. "You need a real book, a thick book, a great adventure, a story for adults, but for children too, for all who are ready." The father also said, "This book will change your life. It will show you that the world is bigger than your room, bigger than your city. It will teach you to fly." And the boy, his name was Marcus, has carried the book everywhere, in his backpack, to school sometimes, hidden under the textbooks, on the train to visit his grandmother in Wetzlar. It was his treasure, his sanctuary, his window. "I think," I said to him, and he listened to me, lowered the book a little, looked at me. "I think your father gave you something very important, not just a book, not just paper and ink and pictures, but a door, a magical door, a door to all possible worlds, all possible lives. And every time you open a new book, this one or another, you open a new door, and you can go anywhere. You can take all possible paths. You can be anything. You can be Frodo. You can be a king. You can be an elf. You can be a dragon rider. The only limit is your imagination, and that is infinite."
And the train went on, through the green valleys of Hesse, and the sun slowly turned orange, and the light changed, and the world grew soft and warm. And the boy read on, but he also ate a biscuit he'd pulled from his backpack, and he looked out the window, at the river, at the meadows. And I saw that he lived the words too, not just read them. That Middle-earth was not just in the book, but out there too, in the river, in the trees, in the air. That for him, for a boy with an open heart, the world itself was an adventure, a story that had never been told, waiting to be lived by him. And he nodded. He understood. And he read on. His eyes went back into the book. And I looked out the window at the summer, at the valleys. And I thought about all the boys, all the girls who make the same inner journey, who sit in trains and houses and schools and libraries, and they read and they fly. Their bodies are here, physically present, but their souls are everywhere else, in Middle-earth, in Oz, in Hogwarts, in Narnia, in Wonderland, in all the worlds. He will be forgotten, this boy, probably. I will not remember his name next week, next month. But I will not forget the reading. I will not forget the feeling of seeing a boy so completely lost in a story that the world around him disappeared. Who was so completely living in another world that this world, this line, this train, this summer, was just a shell, just a body carrying the real story. That is the power of books, you see. They make you immortal. They make you everywhere. They give you a life bigger than your own life. And seeing a boy with a book, that is so beautiful, my heart aches just thinking of it. But you know, I believe, and this is just my old opinion, an opinion of someone who is 70, 80 years old. I believe that this is the secret of a good life. Not that you succeed, not that you make money, not that you become famous, no. The secret is that you can learn to leave your body here, in this train, in this city, in this time, and that you can send your soul somewhere else, to Middle-earth, to the stars, to your dreams, to the infinite possibilities that exist if you just turn a page, just open a book, just follow a story. The train goes on, through the green valleys of Hesse, and the boy reads, and Frodo wanders into the darkness, into the mountains, into the west, and I close my eyes, and I am there too, in the green fields of Rohan, in the dark forests. I am Gandalf, perhaps, or a ranger. I fly with the eagles. I ride on horses. I slowly fall into sleep, warm, safe, cradled in the strong, immortal arms of story. The eternal story that never dies, never ends, but only waits for the next readers. I met the architect on the line from Frankfurt to Hamburg, in the middle of Germany, through Hesse and Lower Saxony, where the landscape grows flat and the sky stretches infinitely wide. She had rolled plans beside her, architecture plans, large blue plans, blueprints of dreams, and she worked during the whole journey, concentrated, serious, drawing, erasing, planning, envisioning the future on paper. She was a woman of middle years, perhaps 50 or 60, with short, practical hair, gray and shining, and eyes that were very focused, very seeing, very awake. The eyes of someone who doesn't just see the world, but reshapes it, reinvents it, transforms it into beauty. The eyes of a creator. She wore a dark, elegant suit, very professional, very serious, very, I am serious about my work. But her
Her hands were soft, artistic, sensitive, with pencil marks, with eraser marks, with the traces of creativity. I asked what she was designing, what the plans showed, and she smiled. Tired, yes, but genuine, but with love. "A museum," she said quietly. "A museum in Hamburg. An architecture museum. That is the irony. A museum of architecture, designed by an architect who travels everywhere, to see the old architecture before I design the new. It is a pilgrimage." She showed me the plans, very carefully, as if showing something sacred. A building, not grand, not extravagant, not bombastic, but harmonious. Curves, gentle arches, light entrances everywhere, as if the sun itself would enter. "That is my philosophy," she said, and pointed to different parts with her pencil. "Not power, not drama, not 'look at me, I am important.' No, harmony. A building should make people happy. It should not say, 'I am great.' It should say, 'I am here, and it is beautiful, is it not? And you belong here.'" She told me about her journey, and I realized at once that this was not just a journey for a museum, that this was a pilgrimage, a spiritual journey, a search for the sacred in architecture. Everywhere in Europe, Oslo with its modern museums, Stockholm with its old houses, Copenhagen with its castles, Brussels with its cathedrals, Paris with its immortal palaces, even Jerusalem with its oldest stones. To study old museums, touch old houses, pray in old churches, understand old mosques, experience old temples. To understand how space leads to emotion, not intellectually, but in the body, in the heart. How light becomes feeling, how sun through a window becomes life. How wood, stone, air, these simple, honest materials can create life, real life, create beauty, hope. "I believe," she said, and her eyes were wet now, but not sad, but fulfilled. "I believe that architecture is a language, like music, like poetry, like prayer. A building can speak to your heart, can change your heart. It can comfort you when you are lonely. It can inspire you when you are lost. It can bring you home when you are far away." 40 years, she said to me, and her voice became nostalgic, grew deep, grew fulfilled. 40 long years I have designed buildings, have created them, have realized them, stone by stone. Schools, where children learn. Offices, where people work. Houses, where families live and love. Churches, where people pray. Always traveling, always on pilgrimages, always searching for something. I don't know exactly what then. Perhaps perfection, perhaps immortality, perhaps only beauty. But I believe I have finally found it. Not perfection. Perfection is a lie, is dead, is impossible. But truth. The truth of space. The truth of how people should live in space, should breathe, should dream, should have hope. The train traveled through green fields, endless green fields, through small villages with red roofs, through the middle soul of Germany. And she worked quietly, concentrated, drawing, erasing, drawing again. Her hands moved with absolute certainty. These were the hands of someone who knows exactly what they are doing, who trusts their abilities completely, who loves their work, who breathes their work. Her hands were quick but not hurried, precise but not rigid, artistic but also practical. And I thought, in the end, at the root, all life is architecture. We build our life from moments, from experiences, like stones, like she builds houses from space. Every day, one stone after another, one moment after another, one breath after another. And someday, after many years, a building will emerge, a house, a life. Something beautiful, something meaningful. She showed me a photograph then, a photo on her phone, but very old, printed, yellowed, of a house she built with her father many years ago when she was young, when the world still looked different. The house was simple, white wood, red roof, wide windows looking out on the garden. But it was not banal. It was honest. It was beautiful without trying. She said, "That was my first big project. My father was a craftsman, not an architect, no, but a man who worked with his hands, who built houses stone by stone. He taught me what it means to make something with love. The house was not expensive, it was not striking, but the people who lived in it, they were happy, and that was enough. That was all I needed to know." She told me that at 16, she knew she wanted to be an architect. Not because of fame, not because of money, she wouldn't get that either, but because of this feeling that she could change the world, not the whole world, no, but the small worlds, the houses, the classrooms, the offices, where people spent their lives. That she could make these small worlds more beautiful, freer, more alive. That she could create spaces where people could be happy. "It sounds naive," she said with a smile, "I know. But when you are 50 or 60 years old and you look back at your life, you will understand. The only things that matter are the things you did for others, the houses you built, the people who became happy in your houses. That is all." Time passed. The train went on, and the sun began to fall lower in the sky. It was late afternoon now, and the light became gold-pink, the light of dusk, the light that makes all things beautiful, even ugly things. And she put her pencils away and leaned back, and her eyes were tired but happy. She said, "You know, I have lived a life that sometimes is incomprehensible to other people. I have traveled much. I am not married. I have no children. Some say that is a lonely life, but I am not lonely. I am in company with houses, with spaces, with the hope that the world can become more beautiful. And that is not lonely. That is fulfilling. That is enough." "The museum," she said at the end of the journey, without looking up, without pausing, "will stand for a long, long time. 100 years perhaps, 200. And people will walk through it and see the history of architecture. They will not think of me, the architect. They will not read my name. They will just feel happy, feel safe, feel beautiful, feel at home. And that is enough. That is all I ever wanted." The train goes on through the night, and the plans are rolled, and the architect sleeps, her hands still warm from the work, from the drawing, from the dreaming, from the building, from the love. And somewhere, far away, in Hamburg, a building grows from her dreams, from stone, from light, from life. And it will make people happy for 100 years. The weight in my pocket woke me tonight, traveling from Strasbourg to Karlsruhe, through the Alsace, this divided land, where history lives still in the walls, in the houses, in the streets, in the hearts of people, where German and French meet like two languages of one heart, one continent, one troubled history. I carried a book with me, heavy and old and precious, a history book, but the weight I felt was something else. It was the memory of a man, of an old soldier, of his locket, of the weight of history, of the weight of love. And suddenly I was no longer on this train, this modern train with its bright windows. I was on another, on an old train, with an old man, with a silver locket around his neck. I met him on a train many years ago, perhaps 30 years ago. Not this train, on an older train, in another time, in another world.
and he wore a locket, a silver, old, precious locket, on a chain around his neck. The chain was heavy, very heavy. You could see it plainly. But he wore it every day, every moment, never without. And I didn't ask him right away why. It is taboo to disturb the stories of old people. But he wanted to tell. He was old, certainly 90 then, certainly older, certainly 100, with eyes that were far away, that lived in the past, that lived in another century. And his uniform was folded in an old suitcase, a German soldier's uniform, very old, very yellowed, almost precious. "That was me," he said to me, without my asking, as if speaking to me and to himself. "That was me, 70, 80 years ago, a soldier, a young man then, a man who believed in things, in homeland, in family, in love." The locket. It was from his mother. He showed me, pulled the locket out from under his shirt, opened it carefully with trembling fingers. A tiny photograph inside, of a woman, young, beautiful, with eyes full of hope and love. "That is Mother," he said, and his voice was like wind through old grass, like a dream, like time itself. "She gave me this locket before I left, before I went to war. She sat on my bed, I still remember, and she said, 'This will protect you. This will bring you home. As long as you have this locket, I will be with you, always. And you will come home. I know it.'" He came home. That is the truth. He survived, God knows how, in Russia, in Siberia, in the prisoner camps. He survived the cold, the hunger, the disease, the hopelessness. But the mother died while he was away, in bombs, in an air raid on his village, by the Allies, not the Germans. The irony of history. She died, and she never knew her son was still alive. And he didn't know until he came back to his home village 3 years after the war ended. And the house was gone, almost a ruin. The street was gone. The blocks of houses were all gone. And the mother was gone, buried in an unknown grave. And there was only the locket, the only thing she left behind, the only thing that remained of her. The only thing that still spoke with her voice, with her smile, with her undying love. "I came home for nothing," he said to me, and the tears came like a great river, like 80 years of suppressed pain. "I came home for nothing, only the locket, the voice, the love, only that. I have worn this for 70, 80 years, he said, and his old trembling hands touched the locket, touched it with the tenderness of love, like a sacred thing, like a talisman, like the substance of hope itself, like the last piece of God on earth. Every day, every night, I wore it in my prisoner of war camp. I wore it when I was freezing. I wore it when I was starving, and it kept me warm. Somehow my mother's love from the locket kept me warm. I was married with this locket around my neck. My wife didn't ask. I had children, 2 sons, both men now, both with their own families, and I told them, "This is the family treasure. This is older than your grandfather. This is greater than gold, greater than anything material. This is Mother. This is the love that survives everything, even the war, even death, even 80 years. And he held up the locket, very carefully, almost tenderly, and moonlight from the train window fell on it, fell precisely on it, as if God himself directed the light. And it shone, this silver thing, it shone like a star, like a real star in the sky, like a hope, like a promise that was 80 years old and not yet broken, not yet faded, not yet turned to dust. And I really saw, that the mother was there, not as a photograph, but as love,
as spirit, as the power that kept a man alive when everything else was death.
I didn't ask him what the mother looked like before the bombs came. I didn't want to ask him if he ever saw her again after he came back. If he found her in the ruins, if a funeral took place, if there was a gravestone. No. Instead, I simply sat there, and I listened to how the wheels of the train went click-clack, click-clack, and I watched how his old face glowed in the light of the locket, illuminated by a love that was 80 years old and still burning. The tears didn't come anymore now. There were only the quiet words of a man who had forgiven everything. The war, the Allies, the Germans, the German government that sent him away, the pain, the loneliness, the cold nights in Siberia where he thought he would die. Everything forgiven, everything in the eyes of his mother, in this silver locket.
His shirt was old, worn, with stains that never went away, no matter how often his wife washed it. I saw the shirt clearly in the train window light, and the locket hung in it, hanging on a silver chain, which was also heavy, also old. He said, "You know, if you wear such a thing long enough, it becomes part of you. It is no longer metal, it is no longer form. It becomes weight, becomes responsibility, becomes love that you must carry, not for yourself, but for the person who gave it to you. For Mother, for the people who didn't come back, for the hope that at least I came back." And there were the tears again, but this time they were quiet, were part of a very deep sorrow, a sorrow that had accepted itself. I remember now, on this train, the weight of the book in my pocket. It is not heavy from the weight of the paper, from the weight of the pages. No. It is heavy from the weight of stories, from the weight of history itself, from the weight of memory, from the weight of love, from the weight of a mother who is long, long dead, but whom the sun still carries around his neck as if carrying the whole world around his neck. And I think of this old soldier, of his locket, of the mother who never knew her son lived. But the son knew that the mother, that the love, was eternal. That love never dies. The train goes on, through the Alsace, through history, through darkness, and somewhere, someone carries a locket around his neck. The mother, the love, keeps him warm in the night, in the cold, in this broken world. And the locket still gleams